Round 4 of the FIDE Women's Candidates 2026, and the race at the top is razor tight. Na Muzychuk and BBSHra Asobi Yeva lead on 2.5 points, with 4 players breathing down their necks at 2. 2 of the 4 games ended decisively today, and the most dramatic saw Muzychuk press her advantage to stay at the summit. This is a tournament where every half point could determine who challenges for the Women's World Championship. Na Muzychuk, the Ukrainian Grandmaster renowned for her precise positional understanding and unrelenting technique, enters this game as the joint leader. Kateryna Lagno, her fellow Ukrainian and one of the most experienced players in this field, is known for fighting chess and deep theoretical preparation. Both needed points desperately, but for Muzychuk, a win would cement her lead. While Lagno was chasing to join the pack at the top, the Ruy Lopez, one of the oldest and most deeply analyzed openings in chess, arises after the classic central confrontation, the delayed exchange variation, where white captures on c6 only, after black has played b7, was a favorite weapon of Bobby Fischer and remains a respected choice at the highest level. It leads to a structural battle where white enjoys the bishop pair and black must carefully coordinate the doubled c-pawns to find counterplay. Muzychuk opens with the king's pawn, staking an immediate claim to the center and signaling her intention to fight for the initiative from the very first move. Lagno responds symmetrically, meeting the center challenge head-on. This is the open game, the battleground of Ruy Lopez, Italian and countless classical encounters. Knight to f3 attacks the e5 pawn immediately, developing with tempo. This is the most principled response and the starting point for some of the deepest theory in chess. Black defends the e5 pawn with the knight, the natural and most popular reply, developing a piece while maintaining the central tension. And here is the Ruy Lopez. The bishop pins the knight against the king, indirectly pressuring e5. This move has been played millions of times from club level to world championship matches. The Morphy defense, black challenges the bishop immediately, asking white to declare intentions. This is by far the most popular response to the Ruy Lopez at every level of play. Muzychuk retreats the bishop to a4, maintaining the pin and keeping the tension alive. Taking on c6 immediately would release the pressure, so white prefers to keep options open. Black develops the kingside knight, counterattacking e4. The position is entering the main lines of the Ruy Lopez, where both sides have spent enormous preparation resources. White castles kingside, tucking the king to safety before the real battle begins. This is the defining moment of the closed Ruy Lopez, and from here theory branches into dozens of complex systems. Black develops the bishop to e7, preparing to castle kingside. This is the most solid choice, avoiding the martial attack and signaling a classical positional approach. Now Muzychuk executes the delayed exchange, capturing on c6 only, after black has already committed the bishop to e7. This is the key distinction from the immediate exchange on move 3. White gives up the bishop pair but inflicts a structural concession, and with the bishop on e7 rather than d6, black cannot easily use the c5 square to activate the doubled pawns. Black recaptures toward the center with the d-pawn, which is the principled recapture, avoiding the passive b-pawn recapture and maintaining central presence. Solid restrained pawn move. White supports e4 and prepares to develop the c1 bishop, choosing a slow positional build-up rather than immediate aggression. An interesting queen placement, centralizing the queen while eyeing the kingside. Lagno prepares to develop actively before deciding on where to castle. White immediately attacks the queenside, probing for weaknesses before black has fully coordinated. This move also prevents any potential a5 ideas from black and begins staking space. The bishop develops to e6, completing black's minor piece development and preparing to castle long. Lagno signals an ambitious, fighting approach with the king heading to the queenside. White routes the knight towards c4, where it will exert powerful central and queenside pressure. The knight on a3 is only a temporary parking spot on the way to its ideal destination. Black creates a little luff before castling long, preventing any backrank tricks and giving the king a potential escape square. A prophylactic move before committing. The knight on f3 retreats to d2, making way to reroute via c4. White is methodically building pressure on the queenside while keeping the position solid. And there it is, Lagno castles queenside, placing the king on c8. This is a bold decision that sets up a classic opposite-side castling fight. Notice how the king on c8 is already somewhat exposed with white's a-pawn bearing down and the knight heading to c4. The knight lands on c4 with powerful effect, eyeing both d6 and b6 while supporting the a4 pawn thrust. White has achieved an ideal setup, and Stockfish already gives a significant advantage. Lagno captures the knight on c4, but this turns out to be a serious mistake. By surrendering the bishop that was guarding key dark squares, Black dramatically weakens the queen side. The evaluation jumps, though it was already elevated. This capture removes one of Black's most important defensive pieces and allows White to recapture with the knight, maintaining a dominant piece on c4, while Black's remaining bishop on e7 is relatively passive. White recaptures with the knight, restoring material balance while keeping the knight on its dominant c4 outpost. The knight here is simply superior to anything Black can muster on the queen side. Another inaccuracy from Lagno. The queen retreats to e6, but this is too passive and allows White to consolidate the advantage comfortably. Black needed more active counterplay given the positional pressure already building on the queen side. Muzychuk centralizes the queen, coordinating with the knight on c4 and preparing to double up on the queenside files. White's position is smoothly improving with each move. Lagno reroutes the knight toward a more active post, trying to regroup the pieces. The knight heads toward b6 or f6 to create some counterplay. The bishop develops naturally, connecting the rooks and preparing to double them on the O or B files. White's pieces are harmoniously coordinated. Black shores up the queenside with b6, trying to create a solid pawn barrier. But this also creates potential weaknesses on c6 and a6 that White can target. White advances the b-pawn immediately, launching the queenside offensive. This space-gaining thrust forces Black to react and accelerates White's attacking plans. Moving the king to b7 to support the a-pawn and connect the rooks is understandable, but the king is walking into danger with White's pieces so active on the queen side. Stockfish marks this as a mistake. The king is now dangerously exposed to the coming pawn storm. White doubles the rooks on the b-file, maximizing queenside pressure. The rook battery on the b-file combined with the knight on c4 creates enormous threats against the exposed king. Black tries to activate the rook, but the defensive task is already very difficult. White's pieces are bearing down on the queen side, and the king on b7 remains vulnerable. A subtle queen maneuver, repositioning toward the a5 square via the first rank. White is in no rush and methodically improves every piece before delivering the decisive blow. Lagno pushes the h-pawn, seeking kingside counterplay to distract White, but with the king on b7, any counterplay on the other wing is insufficient. White strikes with b5, advancing the pawn to open lines on the queen side. This forces a critical structural decision from Black. Black captures back, accepting the pawn exchange and opening the c-file. Declining would allow White to fix the queenside pawns in an even worse configuration. White recaptures with the a-pawn, maintaining the passed b-pawn. The b5 pawn is a significant asset that will require Black's constant attention. Lagno advances the a-pawn to challenge White's queenside control, hoping to complicate the position and create some counterchances. White snaps off the a-pawn with the bishop, winning material and leaving Black's queenside even more fragile. The compensation for Black is not obvious. Black recaptures with the b-pawn, creating a passed a-pawn of her own. The position is becoming very sharp with both sides having passed pawns on opposite wings. The knight captures with check on a5, picking up the passed pawn. The evaluation briefly dips as White chooses this practical continuation. But the material advantage should be sufficient. The king steps to c8, escaping the check and trying to find shelter, but the king remains uncomfortably placed with White's pieces controlling key lines. The knight leaps to c6, a dominant centralized outpost that forks threats and ties down Black's pieces. White's pieces are working in perfect harmony. Lagno exchanges rooks on a1, trying to simplify and reduce White's attacking material. Trading pieces is often the right strategy when defending a worse position. White recaptures with the remaining rook, maintaining the pressure. The rook on a1 is well placed to support future operations along the open file. The knight hops to b6, challenging White's powerful knight on c6 and trying to establish a blockading outpost. Black is fighting hard to find counterplay. The queen centralizes to e3, eyeing both the kingside and the queenside simultaneously. White prepares to continue advancing the passed b-pawn. Lagno develops the bishop to d6, activating it and bringing all remaining pieces into the game. The bishop eyes the b4 square and creates some potential counterplay. White advances the c-pawn, supporting the b5 pawn and gaining more space. Every pawn move tightens the grip on the position. The queen retreats to h6, maintaining some pressure on the kingside while waiting to see White's plan unfold. Black is essentially playing for tricks. Muzychuk checks with the queen on h3, forcing the king to move and disrupting any defensive coordination Black might have been planning. The queen returns to e6, blocking the check and defending. The queens briefly dance around each other as Muzychuk probes for the decisive break. White returns the queen to e3, maintaining the central grip. This maneuvering is deliberate. Muzychuk is waiting for the right moment to strike with the central pawns. Lagno's queen oscillates back to h6 again. Black has very little to do and can only wait for White's final plan to reveal itself. And here it is, the central pawn break that Muzychuk has been building toward. The d-pawn advances, opening lines and creating enormous threats in the center. This move demands an immediate and precise response from Black. And this is the decisive blunder. Lagno captures the d-pawn, but this is a catastrophic mistake that swings the evaluation from roughly equal to nearly +3. By opening the d-file and allowing the queen to recapture with tempo, Black walks into a devastating tactical sequence. The engine shows White now has a near-winning advantage. The king on c8 becomes fatally exposed the moment the d-file opens. Muzychuk recaptures with the queen, and suddenly the threats are overwhelming. The queen on d4 eyes g7, coordinates with the knight on c6, and the rook on a1 is ready to swing into action. Stockfish evaluates this at over +3 for White. Desperate try, Lagno moves the king to b7, but this walks right into the knight fork territory and allows Muzychuk to deliver a stunning blow. The evaluation explodes to nearly +4 and continues to climb. The king on b7 is completely unprotected, and the bishop on d6 is now hanging. White advances the c-pawn to c5, attacking the bishop on d6 and cramping Black's position even further. Every white piece is participating in the final assault. Lagno scrambles the rook back to a8, but this is another critical mistake. The evaluation soars to +4. With the rook leaving the h-file, Black loses any counterplay, and the bishop on d6 remains under attack with no good defense. White captures the bishop on d6, winning material and exposing the king even further. The passed d-pawn is now a monster, and the knight on c6 controls key squares. Lagno recaptures with the queen, but this seals her fate. By recapturing, Black allows the rook to come to a8 with decisive effect. The evaluation jumps to almost +10. The game is essentially over. Notice that after this capture, the rook on a8 is completely unprotected. Checkmate. Muzychuk plays rook to a8. It is checkmate. The king on c8 has no escape squares. The queen on d6 is pinned against the king, and there is simply no way out for Lagno. A stunning finish to a game where White's positional pressure built relentlessly until Black's position simply collapsed. The game was decided by a catastrophic blunder on move 29 when Lagno captured the d-pawn, opening lines directly toward her king on the queen side. From that moment, Muzychuk's pieces converged with unstoppable force. The decisive theme was a classic case of an exposed king. Once the queenside files opened, the monarch had nowhere to hide, and White's rook, queen, and knight delivered a beautiful checkmate. Muzychuk stays joint leader after round 4, and that finish was simply ruthless, exactly the kind of clinical technique you need to win a candidate's tournament. 2 decisive games, 2 draws, and the standings remain incredibly tight with the field separated by just 1 point. Round 5 promises more fireworks. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss a single move. Let us know in the comments, did Lagno miss a save? Or was this always going to end in checkmate?